This is Curious Brain Thoughts.
This is the podcast where two ordinary people have a chat about things they're curious about. Hello, my name is Lou.
I'm Paul.
So, Paul, please do enlighten us. What is a curious brain fart?
Quite simply, it's us two having a chat about whatever might happen to be noodling through our brains that we're curious about and we want to discuss. It's like an idea.
So when you fart, it's kind of...
Outbound.
It's an impromptu outbound thing.
Outbound communication.
And in the same way, very much in that vein.
You'll find a curious brain fart.
So each time we're curious about something and we talk about it, and we'd very much welcome your input. And if you've got anything to say or a topic you want us to be curious about, you can email us curiousbrainfarts@gmail.com. So today's curious brain fart is self-awareness.
I thought you were going to do listening.
Oh, pardon? Oh, yeah. And today's curious brain fart is listening. Why is it so hard to listen properly?
Sorry.
Did you hear me?
I was just having a cup of tea.
So that's just a case study, just a miniature vignette which demonstrates
Yeah.
how challenging
I
it
learned
is.
that at Lada.
Am I A, boring? B, irrelevant?
That's really bad grammar. Am I A, boring? Am I a boring?
It's a list.
Oh.
A, boring. B, irrelevant. C, something else. Why aren't people listening to me is my question.
Great. It's a really good question. Yeah, listening is an interesting one. Yeah.
Why?
Well,
Tell me what your thoughts are. Brain fart me.
well, it's twofold, really.
Mm-hmm.
One is, how well am I listening to others? And how well are others listening to me?
I've thought of a third one, if you don't mind.
Go on.
Best wishes to you. Thirdly, how well am I listening to myself?
Nice enunciation.
So it's an external thing, listening to others listening to me, and it's an internal thing, listening to maybe bad self.
Yeah. And not listening to other people's internal voices, because that would...
How do you listen to that?
Well, you'd be on medication, I think.
Yeah, that's a mental illness, quite possibly.
Yeah. Not that you're qualified.
No, God no. I don't know what I'm talking about. So no one pay attention to anything I've got to say.
And now you're wondering why people don't listen to you.
I think we've solved that. I think that's the end, isn't it?
The end. Good. Well, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Listen. Where to start? Okay, where to start? Listening to others.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear me?
Pardon?
Not the same, is it? Hearing and listening.
This is the thing. So you hear people say a lot, there's a difference between listening and waiting to speak. And what is that difference? Well, if you're waiting to speak, your attention and your focus is on what am I going to say next? And you... maybe not all of your attention's on that, but at least some of it is, and therefore you're not fully listening to the other person. Because they've said, for example, I really don't like biscuits. And you're thinking, who the hell doesn't like biscuits? What kind of massive loser doesn't like bourbons / custard creams, etc.? So you've gone down this mental like rabbit hole in your own brain. They've then gone on to maybe say something really important. You haven't heard it because you're not listening.
Something that is probably quite obvious
Almost certainly.
that I've been thinking about as we've been preparing to do this, and the thinking about what we might talk about and so on, and the fact that we've called it curious brain farts. Maybe, what do you think about this? How much of good listening is connected to curiosity? The reason why I say that is because the example you just gave about why wouldn't you like biscuits is because the listener applies judgment to what the other person has said, and then will start to talk from their perspective. Whereas if you were curious, you would say, oh, that's really interesting. Tell me, why don't you like biscuits? So instead of me putting my judgment on it, I'm using curiosity to make sure I'm giving the other person the opportunity to speak.
I think that's right. And I also think that you said something to me the other day about, I can't remember what the context was, but you'd noticed that in this setting there had been a lot of shift responses. So somebody would say something about themselves, and the person they were having the interaction with would straight away shift it. So using the biscuit example, I say to you, I don't like biscuits, and you say, well, no, when I was going around a biscuit factory, what I saw was that they let loads of flies drop in the Garibaldis, and I've never been able to eat one since.
Yeah.
So you shift it.
And you don't like bald people called Gary either.
Well, you've got your own prejudices, Paul, and your own peccadillos. I'm not here to judge.
Is that another biscuit?
I'm here to be
I've
curious.
got a packet of picadillos.
Poor old bald Garys, they're probably crying into their cups of tea at the moment. Anyway, be that very much
To echoes of Garibaldi.
as it may. So there's something around, I think listening is a function of you not needing to insert yourself into the conversation and make it about you. And I think when you listen for shift responses rather than support responses, and the example you gave was a support response, which is, why is that? What do you find tricky about biscuits? That's a support response. My story.
That sounded like a sport.
Support.
Love tennis. What?
Random support response. Whereas my story about the Garibaldi factory is a shift response because I've made it about me. So maybe that's the thing.
Yeah. It is interesting. I keep saying that because I do find it quite interesting.
Well, say something interesting.
Just
then.
trying to think. I've given you lots already. Okay, I'm having some time off.
We'll agree to disagree about that. I think there's something.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did.
Silence is deafening.
Golden. Oh.
Well, also with listening, so it can also be quite important that you see that the other person, the listener. So what did we say we were talking about first? Listening to others, or being listened to? I can't
Listening to others.
Listening to others. Yep. So, giving these non-verbal cues as well. Like you'll often hear one or other of us going, and nodding. You know, nodding is not for radio.
I'm nodding, everyone, by the way.
And if you hear some creaking, it'll be a neck.
Rude.
Yeah. So I think that's a really important part of it. And, you know, what is the purpose of listening?
So my personal opinion is it's a huge function or part of building relationships. It's one of the foundation blocks because if you come away from an interaction feeling completely listened to, then that's totally different experience to the one I think lots of us have. So, listeners, at the moment, Paul's looking at his phone. Now, that's something that, I mean, he might have an urgent and important thing to do with his family, for example, that he might need to sort out, and that's fine. And a lot of times we have interactions with people where we are listening, and we might be how many people have been on a call, a Zoom call or something or other, where someone's checking their email or someone's looking at their phone, or so I don't know how much we're ever fully present unless we consciously do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm not sure that there is ever a scenario where there is perfect listening, because you've always got thoughts going on through your mind, even if you're in a setting where you are in a very specific one-to-one. So in one of the other episodes, we talked about coaching a little bit. So when you're in a coaching setting, the coach is there in total service of the other person, and the coach is meant to be applying serious effort into their listening, because their listening is going to enable other things to happen for the coachee. Even in those situations, you have ideas, your thoughts pop into your head.
True, you do.
You think about, oh, well, maybe if I ask this next question, it might help to take us one step further down. Do you see what I mean? So, like, it's interesting, because I need to stop saying that, because that's now annoying me. Because I suppose it comes back to the point again around what is listening. And I saw something ages ago by the Dalai Lama. Other lamas are available. Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Just a fact, isn't
You
it?
can't
Other
make-
llamas are available.
That is true. You can't make jumpers out of this one.
No. Well, you could try, but I think
He might object.
a bit messy.
Yeah, and he's not got much hair. Anyway, I was struck by this thing, that a quote from him that says, "When you talk, you are only repeating what you already know. But if you listen, you may learn something new." And that really, really struck me the first time I saw that. It really, really struck me. And it has had an effect on me in the amount I talk. And I don't know, I would need to ask those close around me whether they notice a difference. I certainly feel a difference in myself. I don't talk as much as I used to.
What's the impact?
The impact is that there is more. So I'm not just sat there silently, not participating. I'm really sat there curious, thinking, well, if I'm not saying so much, something new might pop into my head, a new connection, a new thought. It's not like necessarily some pearly bit of wisdom is going to drop in my lap, and it might. Literally, even when we're doing these, for example, I like listening because you say something that then triggers a thought like this in me. So I'm trying to play with the things that you're saying.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Active listening.
Oh, go steady. You are awful.
Oh.
Oh, Mrs. Wembley. Yes, I just think it's a muscle that's underdeveloped, honestly. And I was thinking, when you're saying about settings like coaching, other settings are available where you very deeply listen. It's absolutely frigging knackering.
It is. It really is.
It's exhausting. And so maybe that's another reason why we don't do a lot of it, because it's actually not something we always have capacity for.
It's a good point. because in those moments when you are really deeply listening to somebody, it's almost like some of the energy maybe is in trying to hold yourself back and all these thoughts and things that are sprinkling in, and also trying to absorb everything that the other person is saying. And then you have to pass it through a filter to go, okay, so if I say something, how is this in service of the other person?
Maybe one of the things that stops us being able to listen is our own ego, in a way, where if somebody says something, I need to kind of match that. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it applies in all sorts of different settings, but you see, that little one-upman, I've done this, oh, well, I've done that. It reminds me of that Monty Python sketch where they do it the other way around, and they're like, a shoebox in the gutter. We would be grateful to have a shoebox in the gutter. We ate gravel for Christmas dinner. We were lucky if we got, and they were competing to be the worse off.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we do that in our conversations with each other.
I mean, that touches on a whole sort of massive tree of other things, which is really interesting because we could literally go on for days about those things. As you were talking, I'm thinking not only about ego states, I'm then thinking about life positions, I'm then thinking about games that we all play, transactional analysis sort of stuff, not silly games.
Not Uno.
Well, yeah.
Other games are available.
Yeah. And, oh, bless you.
Just kicked my microphone. Sorry, everyone.
So, the thing that I was thinking about as well with listening and reacting to something. So this can happen in a work setting. Somebody says something and you have a visceral response to it. And you're working hard to try and manage that visceral response. There are other settings, like maybe in relationships, close relationships, friends, family, whomever, where your guard is down a little bit more. And therefore, that visceral response can climb out the box. And what does that do to the listening? So instead of it being, in a way, a partnership, for example, Lou, I'd like to talk to you about something or other, and it's not necessarily related to you, I just want to talk to you about something and I want you to listen. The moment it does touch on something that is related to you and you have a visceral response, whether that be about biscuits or your hair colour or whatever it happens to be, and you respond, that partnership is then disrupted because now there's two people who are wanting to say something that maybe are colliding in the middle.
Yes. And it makes me think, when you were talking, I was thinking, I wasn't really listening to what you're saying. I was thinking about what I wanted to say next.
No, that's great.
It's amazing.
Should be interesting.
Well, it just pinged that thought around boundaries. So if you came to me and you said, Lou, I want to talk to you about something, and I don't want advice, and I don't...
I've never said that before.
No, exactly. I don't want solutions. So being really clear on where your edges are in this. What I'd like from you is to simply listen. The end. That's it. Then that, just being more overt about stating that. It might then support the other person to go, okay, they don't need me to solve it for them. They don't need me to come up with ideas, and you don't fall into some of those other traps around games and ego states and so on, because actually you just need somebody to listen.
So interestingly then, maybe the highest quality listening that we can do is when we are both in what's called an adult-adult space. So that means there's some very big vibrations going on.
Sorry if you could hear that. Somebody slamming the door.
So this is something that we'll talk about another time. And the idea being with the adult state is that it's not that other states are childish or whatever. it's the fact that we are more in control of ourselves. We're more able to regulate ourselves. We are more aware and attentive of ourselves, how we're showing up, how we're talking, the way in which we're listening to other people. And when two people are in an adult space, then, like, this conversation has so far been in an adult space. And we've been able to laugh and joke and giggle and do other things. And we've been able to explore something that we're both interested in, which has required us to listen to each other and regulate. Not jumping in over the top of each other. Sometimes that's fine, and sometimes it isn't. And I think that's where the adult state is super, super powerful. So going back to the earlier point about why is, for example, coaching or intensive listening, why is that so tiring, is maybe because we are having to engage our adult state significantly, as we were saying before, about suppressing some of these other things from jumping in and taking over, because it's tiring.
And the other thing about it is it's a very clearly boundaried space. So some of these intensive listening spaces have clear edges to them, and therefore the roles are clearer. In free form social interactions, it's much less clear.
Yes.
So it's easier to do intensive listening in those settings because it's much, much clearer what's needed and required. It's in these, like I say, these freer form settings, and our inability to hear things or to listen to views that are very different to ours. I was reading a book about listening, and it had this really interesting thing. They put people into a functional MRI scanner, and then through the headphones, they it was political views. They gave them political views that were very, well, the polar opposite of their personal views. And then they looked at what their brain did, and it activated the parts of the brain which would be activated if you were being chased by a bear. So it did take them into that much more primitive part of the brain. By definition, you're disconnected from many of your resources. By definition, you're probably not going to be accessing that adult state that you were talking about. And that's when you hear opposing views, and that circles us back to that thing you were saying earlier about when you're triggered and needing to manage yourself and how you do that. And how we're able to do that is connected to how well we are able to listen, I think, in certain settings.
Yeah, and environments have a lot of influence. If you're trying to have an intensive conversation with somebody in a banging club or a noisy coffee shop, that's going to be pretty difficult.
Yeah,
because you'll be saying, "What? Is that again?" You don't have to talk like that, but you could.
No, indeed, other accents are indeed available. But it makes me think, like, if you think about the other part of that thing you set up at the beginning, which is how does it feel to be listened to? So if you think on the other side of the equation, someone's listening intently to you, and how does that feel? I'm trying to think of a time when that's...
I was going to ask you the question. I was going to ask it, so I can imagine what it feels like to be intensely listened to. And I think the closest for me, not exclusively, the closest is therapy.
Same here.
And it's not exclusive because the therapist is human. Sometimes they get it wrong or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that's the closest, I think.
Same here. And back to what we were saying before. That's a boundaried space with clearly set up roles.
Okay, other situations are available.
But isn't it interesting that that's for both of us our experience of being intently listened to?
Because thinking about what does it feel like, I would feel warm inside.
Where in your body?
Probably in my heart. I'd feel warm and very loved
Mm.
and totally at ease.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I can imagine, there's other words I want to say, they're just not coming to me. And I can imagine what it would feel like to be really listened to.
Mm.
Which is quite exciting, actually.
Mm.
Because I guess that opportunity for me to be listened to and for me to listen to others is available every day.
Yep. For sure. For sure. We just are flawed humans and cannot always pick it up, and that's okay.
Because being listened to, so if we flip the three-sided coin,
Easy.
heads or tails or middle, if we flip that coin and we look at being listened to, what's the purpose? What's the intent? What are we looking for? Because if you go into a conversation, so this is really interesting because this will affect the quality of the listening. So let's not talk about boundary spaces because they're very sterile. So let's just talk about any other interaction, no matter what it is. If the intention, so I really want you to listen to me, intention is because I'm right. What's that going to do to the other person?
See, I don't necessarily agree that that is the intention. Or
No,
are you
I'm
saying that's one of them?
example.
Gotcha. Okay.
If you listen.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's just it's so difficult because of course the other person will, in a heartbeat, in a nanosecond, pick up on that intention.
Yeah, without saying a word.
And just, you don't have to say, okay, my intention is to demonstrate that I'm correct to
Okay,
you.
yes, I'm paying attention now.
So we're very, very adept at picking up on all of that stuff. And so what happens then, for me personally, is I feel a bit irked. I feel a bit irritated by that.
100%.
And I am likely then to start running a little tape in my head, which is like, who do they think they are to turn up here and come off as Captain Right of Right Town? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But where's the space for me? In other words...
Ego.
Yeah. And I start pushing back then. And so that's just unhelpful. What else could I do if I'm if I'm listening to somebody whose intent is that to demonstrate that they're right? Maybe to just A, recognise that, notice that that's what's going on. B, to be curious about that. I wonder why Paul is so desperate to prove that he's right in this. What's happening there?
Because I think we can summarise all of those different scenarios as someone needing to play a game of I'm right, you're wrong. Now I've got you, you son of a bitch. Listen to me. You don't know how bad it is. Yes, but the intention, there is always an underlying intention of whatever could be going on in terms of a game. And I guess, therefore, it's the ability for us to be able to... So then we're sort of flipping back again to the previous scenario, us to be able to manage ourselves in how we are listening.
So I think, and we will talk more about games in another episode. We have referenced it a couple of times, but we'll come back to it in more detail. But I think listening is the bedrock of relationships. One of them.
Human connection.
Trust, safety, and the things that you said, how you feel, it touches your heart. You feel loved because someone is properly listening to you. Now, I know that's in that setting. And
it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. And how would it be if... I mean, goodness gracious me, imagine the interactions with our friends and our families, if we were able, and we won't be able to all day, every day, because we'd be a dribbling puddle on the floor by the end of the day. I've done some extremely good listening, and I'm now fit for nothing.
I'm spient.
Spient fjorce. And if you're, I'm just thinking, if my child comes to me, Mama, I need to have a talk to you about something, that is a clear signal to me to put down
to
everything.
Tell them all the answers.
It's a clear signal to me to go on my phone and my computer at the same time and go, yeah, right,
What?
the point is, we don't need to do it all day, every day. That's not the requirement. And people in our lives will signal to us when they need us.
Yeah.
Do we pick that cue up or not?
Yeah, it's interesting.
How many times have you said
I know.
interesting?
And
I wish I was
nearly got
counting.
away with it because I was really concentrating hard on not saying interesting. And then I noticed you said interesting about 4 times. And I was like, brilliant, I've passed it on.
I was goading you.
And then I've slipped up again.
Do you know, it's the way when you buy a red car and then you see, not just a red car, but you buy a red polo and then you see nothing but red polos.
Everywhere.
All over the place. It's a bit like that.
Yes.
So,
what I was thinking about was when you do want someone's input, and that might be expressly stated or not, might just be part of a conversation like this. There's lots of like sending and receiving going on between us, and that feels like a very different type of listening because, again, it's tiring. And I am listening very carefully to what you're saying. 1, because it's interesting. 2, it might stimulate something in me. And 3, I want to also be able to participate in the dialogue. So this is just a big old bundle of ears.
pardon?
A bag of ears.
And I think that for some situations it's really okay, that expression to have half an ear on something, that's actually okay. And it's, if we fully felt and processed everything that we heard in a day, it would be so overwhelming. So the hearing, we hear all these sounds and all these etc. Properly listening is a choice, and it is something that we know builds huge trust and connection with others. And just for me personally, the reflection I'm it's been so interesting talking about it, because my reflection is I can do it more. I can choose to do it more.
I love these because there's always lots of, like, we have no idea where we're going with these conversations.
What?
We've literally spent totally no time planning these and prepping them. And through these conversations, through these exchanges, there's always something that comes up that I can take away.
Yeah, same. Same. Something to think about, something to reflect on. And it's it's really nice, and it's a special thing to be able to have those conversations. And in a way, I guess that's why we decided to do this podcast, not because we think we're amazing and know all the things about all of the other things or have any of the answers to all of the things.
Various things are available.
It's just because we enjoy it.
Yeah.
And we have a bit of a laugh, and interesting things come up. And so our hope is that some of these interesting things resonate with the people who listen. And
Or hear.
yeah,
They might not be listening. They could just be hearing.
fine.
They're working in the background.
They might be working, going around Aldi's, doing the weekly shop.
Sat down at the computer, tapping away, listening to our dulcet tones.
Yeah.
Because that's another aspect of listening. So I love music.
Yeah.
I know you do as well.
I do.
And we both love listening to music. And so here's something else that's curious. I avoided the
I word.
the terrible word, which is that listening to music is different. So I happen to know that from previous conversations we've had, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you listen to the words a lot of the music you listen to. I know this because when we've had conversations about songs, you've heard something different to what I've heard. I'm listening to the musicality, so I'm not necessarily focusing on the words. I might be listening to the timbrance and the rhythm of the vocals and how that fits in the composition with everything else. And that is pleasing to my ear. That's why I can listen to music in any language, because I'm not focused on the words. Whereas other people are very focused on the words and they are deeply meaningful, and they're not listening to the melody or the timing, or do you see what I mean? There's different ingredients that are pleasing for people to listen to. I find that very fascinating. I missed the I word again.
Amazing. Yeah, it is interesting because oh my God, you passed it on. Jesus Christ, on a bike. Sorry for the blasphemy, guys, but honestly, these conditions,
Yeah.
simply awful.
Avoid the I word.
Stop it, Paul. I hadn't thought about the music side of it as much, but it's such a personal thing. And it's interesting because I said it again. It's fascinating. Because when I think about music, I do listen to the words, you're right. And I don't just like, I love the written word. I love books. I love poetry. I love play. I just love it.
Yes.
Words, I think we would all agree, are very, very powerful. But for me...
Some might say mightier than a sword.
They may. But for me, they are like a core thing. So it's no surprise I listen to the words. It's poetry set to music, right? That's what it is for me. And it's so interesting because then there's a kinesthetic element to it for me. I like music with a beat, not exclusively, but I really like music that you can move to, that you can dance to. And it creates this emotional response. So it's not a passive, listening to music is not a passive thing, even though the person might be sat there with some headphones on, and to all intents and purposes, with their eyes shut, they could be asleep. But they could be having a deeply profound experience with the music.
And just like people might want to move to the music they're listening to, people might want to move when they are listening to a conversation, to something.
Walk and talk.
Exactly. I don't know about you, when I'm on the blower...
Pacing up, get my steps up, get my steps in. 10,000, no problem.
Yeah, I'm wearing out the house because I just start doing laps. Making sure I'm alternating the places where I'm walking so I don't wear the floor out too soon. There's a lot of aspects to it. Then you take things like other art forms, be that theatre or watching a film or something. Again, a different type of listening, watching TV, whatever. And I love that point about the words. So I am very much about the words. I'm very deliberate with my choice of words. And again, just like we listen to music differently, your love of words is different to mine. Because I actually find lots of words on a page a bit of a barrier for me. It's too overwhelming. Whereas having a conversation that's partially articulate, you know.
That's my bit. BT dubs. You're welcome.
I absolutely love. And I love listening to, it makes me think about then words and how I am interpreting things. It makes me think about accents and how accents are so different. And that's a whole different ballgame. Who would have thought listening, just that one topic, could be so intriguing?
Hey! So, words are powerful. Choose yours with care.
Shut up.
Bog off. And I meant that.
Yeah.
I carefully selected
carefully-
those words.
From all them many books you've got.
And what a vocab.
Like, what? That's another great one.
That's amazing. So,
Yeah. You trying to round off
I am rounding off because I think that
with a
with a what?
triple backflip? I was trying to think of gymnastics, you know, like a something Russian or something.
I don't know.
They got funny names, haven't they? Anyway,
Slight digression.
I'm listening. Oh, one other thought. Picking up non-verbal things, non-audible, let's say, things, enriches the listening. The reason why I thought about that is because that last comment that you made, you know, hand gestures, smiling, frowning, hopping up and whatever, enhances the listening.
Oh, and you know that statistic.
So much for rounding off.
I know, we've gone down another avenue here. That statistic that says 70% of communication is non-verbal, that is only true when there's a incongruence between the words that are said and the tone and the body language.
So, for example, if I said, I'm really happy.
I'd be like, although Paul has said he's really happy, I'm picking up very clearly that he is not. So that's where that comes from. It's actually flipped the other way round
Yeah.
when there's congruence between the two. And
I'm
so
loving this.
that's why words are so powerful. When they're lined up with, you know, how you're feeling inside and all that jazz.
Then you've got things like public speaking. Because what you're trying to do with public speaking, that's one way. So you are trying to influence people's ability to listen to you. So if you're talking like this about something that you feel very passionately about, then...
Well, I've nodded off. I don't know about you.
And or if you can't hear them properly because they're whispering, you know, or talking very quietly in a bigger space, or it's so we are actually able to influence how well someone can listen.
That's also true. That's also true.
I love this rounding off. We should
it's
do
good,
these
innit?
rounding off
It's good, innit?
sections.
And those TED, you know, the TED Talk, the most listened to / watched TED Talks of all time. Obviously, you've got Brené Brown up there. There's Ken Robinson.
Brilliant.
Love,
Two legends.
amazing. And the Ken Robinson one is funny. It is funny. So one of the things
Very
he
smart.
does is he uses humour really, really well to break the ice, and his point is still there. It's not a stand-up comedy routine.
No.
It's making a serious point. So all of these devices, maybe public speaking is another topic, that we do at some point. So I'm going to have another go at rounding off.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And this time with a
Triple Salco. There we are.
great.
There we are.
Get in there.
Don't know what that is.
I love the sound of it though.
Listening
Pardon?
fully it's very difficult. It's draining. It draws down on a lot of capacity, and therefore it's actually quite an intense thing, and it's not something we necessarily want to do all day every day or can do all day every day. And listening is the bedrock of connection and trust and love and warmth between people.
And it's laden with choice.
Yes.
It's laden with choice. Awesome.
Amazing.
Well done, Lou.
Hasta más tarde.
See you. Bye.
Later.
Curious Brain Thoughts.